even in Japan, especially after March 11, increasing number of people realizing that we need to have different kind of vision, not globalization. So many people are going back to the country yard to have their own field, and so if somebody or some groups of people in local area or even in Tokyo deciding that they would go for localization, so you have been seeing and encouraging many activities for localization. So what are the roadmaps or the menus for these people, the startup localization?
Yeah, well, I really want to urge particularly a two-pronged path, and one of them has to do with taking steps in your own life right now to reconnect to community and to nature. These are things that you can do without money, and even if you have very little time, you can actually gain so much by doing that. So, recently I've met people, who are quite depressed, and we have found that one of the key recipes against that is connecting to other people and connecting to nature. And if you do that as a group effort, you can actually reverse so many of these problems very quickly. And so, for instance, I recommend, say, for a housewife who's alone with a child, to try to find maybe 4 or 5 other women to share things. And that can also liberate them up to maybe do another business on the side or to do an activism together. So this kind of step we can take right away. And that one path towards localizing that can be so strengthened by forming a group can then also lead to really being part of what is already a localization movement, where food is becoming the center. And there are millions of projects now whether it's involving school children to grow some food, whether it's farmers markets, whether it's community supported agriculture. These are a vital central part of the new world, of the new economy, and you can contribute to that right now. Even if sometimes the food may be a bit more expensive, you can do some volunteering and then you will get some food for free, or there are many, many ways to be part of that. As this movement has grown, there is also local financing that's taking all kinds of shapes, including the shift towards a local stock market that my friend Michael Schumann is working on. We're trying to shift the money away from Wall Street to Main Street. There is local business alliances, like another friend, Judy Wicks, is creating, where local businesses link together, and very much part of educating the consumer, and very much happening with the help of groups of consumers. So these movements are happening and they're growing and they are so inspiring. So start taking steps to inform yourself and to join those. But also the other path, which I see as equally important, is to link that knowledge and awareness to spreading information as activism. So this path of information as activism is something that maybe you would only do 1 hour a week, ideally as a group again, as a group. You might send out emails, but not just once. You try to keep up this flow of information. You try to get people to promise to send on themselves. You try to encourage film showings. There's a plethora of really good films. You try to, maybe if you're a songwriter, you write songs about these issues. Try to communicate a different vision. But very much part of that informationless activism is also to spread the word that tragically our politicians, and I mean almost all of them worldwide, are so locked into an idea of growth which has meant freedom, free trade for giant monopolies. So Obama, as well as the Prime Minister of Japan, as well as Prime Minister of my country in Sweden, they're all supporting the creation of billionaires, wherever they may be, global billionaires, global corporations, through free trade treaties. and that this is having a disastrous effect. That information needs to be got out so that people will very clearly see localization not as some tiny little side issue, but as a way of promoting small scale on a large scale.
Yeah.
Many small farms can produce much, much more than one giant farm. If you have 2 hectares and you produce diversity on it, you can produce vastly more than you could on a much bigger farm with monoculture. So this is a key element in terms of ecological literacy and real economic literacy. So it's these 2 paths of joining the localization movement, but also doing education as activism.
Right. And this is going to be my last question. Increasing number of Japanese municipalities are now trying to hammer out their own indicators, not GDP. So last year we did survey about the Japanese municipalities, and we found out about 20-25 municipalities are trying to develop their own well-being indicators. And we looked at these indicators and what we found was that they are focusing on happiness aspect. That is very important. But in order to support the local level well-being, we need to incorporate some economy aspect as well. So my last question for you is that what are kind of aspect or indicators they can incorporate in their well-being measures?
Well, one of the key aspects, unfortunately, has to be the exact opposite of what they're being asked to do in the trade treaties, and the TPP and so on, which is that they should be able to favor local procurement. So this is something that the movements have pressured local governments and national governments to do. You know, whether it's the prisons or the government bodies or the schools, that they should source local food, for instance. But the treaties are in exactly the opposite direction. And so I would urge, again, also at the level of local government, I would urge people to also, in a very gentle, non-aggressive way, try to spell out why that is a really wrong direction. And I want to stress that the sort of major policy shift that we need to be lobbying for, part of the education work, is to show that what we need is new trade treaties, because this is going to be easier solved internationally by governments sitting down around the same table, where they've been sitting and giving more freedom to huge monopolies. They're now going to say collectively, sorry, we are not going to be able to let you have all this freedom. Our people want us to protect jobs and the environment. We're going to make protectionism a positive term, not a negative term. And we're going to do so by preventing you from being able to say to us that if you don't do as we say, if you don't give us all that big global infrastructure, if you don't devalue your currency, if you don't give us cheap labor, we're going elsewhere. That going elsewhere is what localization is going to prevent. Localization will mean, sorry, whatever you are, car industry, war machinery industry, whatever you are, you're going to belong either to Japan or America or China, and that means you've got to adhere to the rules that society sets. Doesn't mean that we have to have a type of communism where government runs business. It's that society sets certain rules, and if those rules are broken, you're not going to be able to operate. So this is why, for me, localization is the systemic alternative, because it isn't just about farming at a very local level. It's even about the car industry, which does need a certain degree of centralization. There is a certain efficiency of scale with industrial product, but the economic entities should not be able to say, move, I'm going to go somewhere else. They have to be place-based or localized. At the local government level, despite the national and international deregulatory treaties, there are some very good initiatives, and there's a lot more response to local people. And so I feel that one of the key things that one should be encouraging there is more of a discussion about these issues and joining the educational activism movement. And then sometimes what's happening in some countries is that the local government will turn a blind eye to certain things that have been coming from above that they don't agree with. And that is happening with many local governments. And they're even allowing, for instance, people to sell certain foods which the food and safety people have said, you know, you can't do, which are actually coming from big business, not to do with public health. And so there is a lot of goodwill, and I think more than anything, maybe this whole analysis that I'm trying to convey about the economics of happiness has to do with recognizing our problems do not come from some kind of innate human greed and aggression. On the contrary, even when people are struggling, there's so much goodwill, there's so much desire for something better, something more collaborative, something more sustainable, for greater security. That's a natural human instinct. So more than anything, the economics of happiness is about recognizing that what human beings universally desire is to be loved and respected, to be seen and heard, to be connected to other people. And that's what localization can bring about, and that's why I'm passionate about promoting it.